As the scorching sun sets over the Nile, casting its last golden rays over the sands of Egypt, the scene unfolds like an ancient tapestry, a living mythology woven into the fabric of reality. The gods are in motion. From the temple of Heliopolis, Ra, the sun god, begins his final descent, a celestial journey that will carry him through the perilous underworld, where the forces of chaos, embodied by Apep, the serpent of destruction, lie in wait. Osiris, ruler of the afterlife, stands at the threshold of death, his fate sealed by betrayal, his resurrection an eternal reign, a testament to the ancient promise of renewal. This moment, where light battles darkness and life contends with death, is not just a cosmic drama. It is the very essence of Egyptian mythology, a mythology that, for over 3,000 years, has captivated the minds of mortals and immortals alike, providing answers to questions that are as old as humanity itself. What is creation? What is the purpose of life? And, most hauntingly, what awaits beyond the veil of death? In this story, the gods are more than symbols. They are the forces that shape the world. From the self-creation of Adam, rising from the primordial waters of Non, to the complex web of gods, mortals, and spirits battling for cosmic order, Egyptian mythology stands as a monumental achievement in human imagination. The vast empire of Egypt, stretching from the fertile banks of the Nile to the scorching deserts beyond, was not merely a land of kings and pharaohs. It was a realm where the divine and mortal intertwined, where the gods were ever present in both the cosmos and the lives of everyday Egyptians. And as the pharaohs stood as the living embodiment of Horus, they carried the weight of the gods' will, ensuring that cosmic order, Maat, was upheld. It is within these vast themes, life, death, cosmic battles, and divine kingship, that the story of Egyptian mythology unfolds, a narrative as timeless and enduring as the pyramids that still gaze over the Nile's eternal flow. Hey there, I'm glad you're here. In today's video, I will take you through the timeline of the whole story of Egyptian mythology. We'll start by exploring the primordial chaos that gave birth to the gods, then dive into the epic creation myths that shaped Egypt's divine order. We'll witness the cosmic battles of Ra, the story of Osiris and his resurrection, and unravel the mysteries of the afterlife. Along the way, we'll uncover how the gods maintained balance and how their influence still echoes today. But before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there in the comments. We'd love to know. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the fascinating world of history and mythology. If you decide not to subscribe, kindly let us know why in the comments. We'd love your feedback. The ancient land of Egypt, nestled between the unforgiving desert and the life-giving waters of the Nile River, provides one of the most compelling backdrops for any civilization in human history. It was a place where the gods were believed to walk the earth, where the physical world was inseparable from the spiritual, and where the very flow of the river that traversed the land reflected the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth. But before we can understand how the Nile shaped Egypt's mythology, we must first take a step back to examine the environment that nurtured this ancient civilization. Egypt's geography is extraordinary, an expanse of lush, fertile land squeezed between the endless sands of the Sahara Desert to the west and the arid wilderness of the Eastern Desert to the east. The desert, with its vast emptiness, symbolized chaos, a land beyond human cultivation or divine intervention. Yet, from this desolate environment, life emerged, sustained and made possible by the Nile. The Nile is no mere river. It is the river. Flowing northward from deep within the heart of Africa, the Nile is the longest river in the world, snaking its way over 4,000 miles, carving through the land like a vein that nourishes all that surrounds it. This mighty river is the lifeblood of Egypt, and it provides the context for the myths, rituals, and beliefs that permeated every aspect of Egyptian life. At the heart of Egypt's relationship with the Nile is the annual inundation, an event so predictable, so certain, that it shaped the very fabric of Egyptian timekeeping. From around 3100 BCE, when Egypt was first unified under the leadership of the first Pharaoh, the Egyptians had a sophisticated understanding of the cyclical nature of the Nile's flood. Each year, like clockwork, the waters would rise, submerging the surrounding land in rich, nutrient-filled silt. This flood, which began around June, marked the beginning of Egypt's agricultural year, replenishing the soil and ensuring that life could flourish again. Yet, this wasn't just an agricultural phenomenon. It was divine intervention in the eyes of the Egyptians. To them, the Nile's flood was no ordinary natural event. It was the tears of Isis, weeping for her dead husband, Osiris, whose death and resurrection symbolized the eternal cycle of life. The flood represented a gift from the gods, a life-giving force that replenished not only the crops, but the very souls of the people. The myth of Osiris, whose death brought the floodwaters, was inseparable from the annual rise of the Nile. Through Osiris's sacrifice, the Egyptians understood that life and death were intertwined in a continuous cycle of regeneration. This divine symbolism was woven into the fabric of Egyptian cosmology, and the annual flooding of the Nile was seen as a manifestation of divine will, a cycle of creation, destruction, and rebirth that mirrored the sun's daily journey across the sky. The sun, represented by Ra, was believed to be reborn each day, just as the land was renewed with the floodwaters. The Egyptians saw time itself as cyclical, a pattern that repeated eternally, mirroring the Nile's inundation, the rising and setting of the sun, and the seasons of the earth. In Egyptian mythology, creation was not viewed as a one-time event, but as an ongoing process that required constant renewal. The gods, like Ra and Osiris, represented the forces of creation and renewal, just as the Nile's flooding brought the earth back to life each year. The cosmic order, represented by the goddess Maat, was mirrored in the orderly flooding of the Nile, a force that must be maintained, that required ritual and sacrifice to continue. The river's cycle was a reflection of the divine cycles governing the universe. In the same way that the Nile brought forth abundance from the chaos of the desert, so too did the gods and pharaohs maintain cosmic order in a world that was always at risk of slipping into disorder. The pharaohs, believed to be the earthly embodiment of Horus, the son of Osiris, were tasked with maintaining this divine balance. The kingdom's success was directly linked to the pharaoh's ability to uphold the principles of Maat, truth, justice, and cosmic order, just as the flooding of the Nile ensured that life would continue and that the land would be fertile for the coming year. In the grand scheme of Egyptian thought, the Nile was not just a river. It was the axis mundi, the center of the world. All of creation flowed from it, and all of life depended on it. The Egyptians saw the Nile as a living entity, a god in itself, whose floodwaters had a direct impact on their spiritual well-being. In fact, the flood was so central to Egyptian life that it became synonymous with divine intervention. It was believed that without the flood, the land would dry up, crops would fail, and the people would suffer. The gods had to be appeased, for their favor was the only thing that could ensure the cycle of the Nile continued. Thus, the Nile was more than a river. It was a reflection of the divine, the cyclical nature of time, and the renewal of life. It was the force that sustained not just the physical landscape, but the spiritual and social fabric of Egyptian civilization. Through the Nile, the Egyptians understood that the gods were not distant beings but active participants in their lives, ensuring that life, death, and rebirth would continue in a harmonious and predictable cycle. And this cycle, much like the floodwaters, would renew the land and the people for generations to come. The history of Egyptian mythology begins at a pivotal moment in the country's distant past, around 3100 BCE, when the land was united under the rule of the first pharaoh, King Nama, or Mens. This historical event, often referred to as the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, laid the groundwork for much more than just political stability. It forged a civilization where mythology and governance would be inseparable, deeply shaping not only the Egyptian identity, but the very fabric of the cosmos itself. Before the unification, Upper and Lower Egypt were two separate regions, each with distinct deities and creation myths. The southern region of Upper Egypt revered gods such as Horus, the god of kingship, the sky, and the sun, while Lower Egypt held gods like Set, the god of chaos, desert storms, and disorder. With Nama's triumph over the north and the establishment of a centralized rule, Egypt's two lands became one. And with this political union came a natural blending of the gods and mythologies. The pharaoh, from this point onward, was not just a ruler. He was the living embodiment of divine power. The concept of divine kingship was born. The king, now seen as a direct descendant of the gods, was tasked with more than maintaining law and order. He was responsible for upholding Maat, the cosmic balance that governed the universe. The pharaoh's role was sacred. He was the mediator between the gods and humans, ensuring that Egypt remained in harmony with the divine order. This understanding of kingship would shape Egyptian religion for millennia to come. Maat, truth, balance, and cosmic order. At the heart of this divine kingship was the concept of Maat. However, Maat was not just a philosophical notion or a passive principle. It was the very force that kept the universe functioning. It was the eternal law of the cosmos, an abstract yet living and breathing force. Maat was the force that kept the sun rising, the seasons cycling, and the Nile flooding at the right time. Without Maat, the universe would descend into chaos, and the cycle of life would be broken. Maat was embodied by the goddess Maat, often depicted as a woman with an ostrich feather on her head, a symbol of lightness and balance. This feather, as light as truth itself, was used in the weighing of the heart ceremony, where the heart of the deceased was measured against the feather to determine their worthiness in the afterlife. If the heart was found to be lighter than the feather, the soul was deemed pure and worthy of eternal life. This ritual emphasized the importance of living a life in accordance with truth, not only for personal salvation, but for the very stability of the cosmos. But Maat wasn't just about cosmic order. It permeated Egyptian society at every level. The pharaoh's responsibility was to live by Maat, ensuring that the laws of the land, the rituals of the gods, and the daily interactions between Egyptians followed the principles of justice, harmony, and truth. The pharaoh's role was to enforce this order, acting as the living embodiment of Horus on earth and the executor of divine will. The temples and rituals, overseen by the priesthood, were central to upholding Maat. The gods required regular offerings and prayers to maintain balance, and the pharaoh, as the intermediary, was the one to provide this. The connection between Maat and Egypt's natural environment cannot be overstated. The Nile River, central to Egyptian life, was not only seen as a source of fertility and wealth, but as a direct representation of the divine balance. The annual inundation of the Nile, which brought life-sustaining waters to the fields, symbolized the renewal of Maat itself. Each year, the flooding of the Nile was viewed as a divine act, a cyclical event that mirrored the birth, death, and rebirth of the gods. This cyclical nature is evident in Egyptian mythology, especially in the myth of Osiris, the god who dies and is resurrected every year, symbolizing the agricultural cycle. Just as the Nile floods the land to give birth to new life, so too does Osiris's death and resurrection bring life to Egypt's fields. It is this belief in the eternal cycle of life and death, order and chaos, that was at the heart of Egyptian thought and religion. The Egyptians saw the gods not as abstract, unreachable figures, but as active participants in the world, with Ra, the sun god, being reborn each day, and Osiris, the god of the afterlife, continuously undergoing cycles of death and rebirth. The pharaoh's role in maintaining Maat was more than ceremonial, it was existential. The survival of Egypt and the stability of the universe itself depended on the pharaoh's adherence to Maat. The divine king's success in upholding Maat could be seen in the prosperity of the land, the Nile's predictable flooding, the rich harvests, and the welfare of the people. If the pharaoh failed to keep Maat, the consequences were disastrous. Chaos would reign, the land would become barren, and Egypt would fall into disorder. The role of the pharaoh was thus not just political, it was divine, and he was considered a living god, ordained to maintain balance and keep the forces of chaos at bay. Imagine a time before the beginning of time itself, when there was nothing but darkness, emptiness, and boundless water. This was the Nun, the vast and endless primordial sea that existed in the void, long before the gods took form or the world came into being. The Egyptians didn't see Nun as just a concept of chaotic waters. It was the very essence of potentiality, a space where creation had not yet begun, and the universe was still nothing more than raw possibility. In the Egyptian worldview, Nun was not simply chaotic in the sense of being destructive. Instead, it symbolized the raw, undifferentiated state of existence, the time before form, before there were gods, light, or even the earth itself. For the ancient Egyptians, this was not a void devoid of meaning, but rather a fertile cosmic womb, the place of birth, where order would eventually emerge. This vast, watery expanse held the promise of creation, a concept rooted in the understanding that from the most formless and dark beginnings, all life and order would emerge. The people of Egypt, who lived alongside the mighty Nile, saw parallels between the primordial waters of Nun and the Nile's annual flood. Every year, as the Nile overflowed its banks, it brought fertile silt, enriching the land and bringing life to the otherwise dry desert. In many ways, the Egyptians saw Nun in a similar light, as the floodwaters of creation, essential for bringing life into the world, even though they were, initially, without form or definition. From this chaos, from the waters of Nun, the first god, Atum, would emerge. The myth of Atum's birth is perhaps one of the most significant in Egyptian thought. According to the Heliopolitan creation myth, which dates back to around 2500 BCE, Atum rose from the waters of Nun as the very first being, a god who existed before all other gods. Imagine, for a moment, the first rays of light breaking through the darkness, the first stirring of creation from an infinite sea of stillness. Atum emerged alone, with nothing but the dark waters surrounding him, symbolizing both the beginning of creation and the birth of the sun, the ultimate force that would bring light to the world. Atum's emergence from none is not just a physical birth. It represents the moment when order began to take shape out of the endless chaos. From the formless waters, Atum brought the first sense of shape, form, and identity. Atum didn't just rise from the waters. He was self-created, an act that reflects the Egyptian belief in the inherent power of the gods to create themselves and shape the world around them. Atum's self-creation is an important concept in Egyptian cosmology, representing the idea that creation wasn't just a passive event. It required an active act of will at the divine. From Atum, the creation cycle began to unfold. Atum then gave birth to two more gods, Shu, air, and Tefnut, moisture, marking the birth of the fundamental elements that would later create the earth, Geb, and sky, Nut. This divine generation, where gods were born from one another, would become a recurring theme in Egyptian mythology, illustrating the cyclical nature of life and creation. The key point that the Egyptians understood, and one that sets their view of none apart from other mythologies, is that chaos, represented by none, was not inherently bad. Instead, Nun was potential. In the Egyptian understanding of the universe, chaos and order were not opposites, but complementary forces. Without chaos, there would be no creation, no birth of gods, no world in which life could flourish. In fact, Nun's darkness and formlessness gave birth to light and structure, much like how the Nile's floodwaters temporarily engulfed the land to later provide fertile soil. The flooding was a necessary process, both destructive and regenerative, just as Nun's chaos was essential for the universe's formation. In Egyptian thought, creation always began with chaos. The gods were the beings who tamed this chaos, shaping it into something that could sustain life. The Nile River itself is a perfect analogy for Nun's role. Every year, the river would rise from its banks, seemingly overflowing and chaotic, yet it brought fertility, abundance, and life. Just like the Nile's flood, Nun was a force of change, a chaotic force that ultimately brought life into being through divine intervention and will. In Egyptian mythology, the concept of rebirth was central to both cosmic and personal experiences. The gods themselves were believed to be reborn from none in cycles, just as the sun, represented by Ra, was reborn every day. The gods' continual journey through cycles of life, death, and rebirth mirrored the annual rise of the Nile and the unceasing cycles of nature. These cycles were not only natural rhythms, but also deeply spiritual acts that tied the gods and humans to the rhythms of the universe. Similarly, in the afterlife, the return to none symbolized a return to the cosmic origin. For the ancient Egyptians, the journey of the soul did not end in death, but continued as a return to the waters of none, where it could be reborn into the next cycle of existence. The belief in rebirth from chaos, whether through the gods or through the individual's journey to the afterlife, was fundamental to Egyptian thought. Thus, none represents both the beginning and the end, the endless potential from which all creation springs. From the formless waters arose the first god, Atum, and from him all other gods, and with them the universe itself. Chaos, in Egyptian mythology, was not a force of destruction, but a vital, necessary component of creation, a force that allowed the gods to shape the world. The Egyptians, with their deep understanding of the Nile, embodied this principle in their daily lives, rituals, and beliefs. Through none, we see a profound connection between the Egyptians' spiritual life and their natural environment, one where the chaos of the Nile's flood, like the chaos of creation, brought life from death and order from disorder. To understand the Egyptian creation story, we must first enter the great abyss of none, a vast and boundless sea of chaos that existed before time itself. Picture an endless stretch of dark, turbulent waters, completely formless, with no sky or earth, just an infinite expanse of potential, waiting for something to break the stillness. This was none, the primordial waters, the foundation of all creation in Egyptian mythology. But even in this chaotic sea, the Egyptians believed that order would eventually arise, much like how the Nile's floodwaters would rise, seemingly chaotic, only to leave behind fertile, life-sustaining soil. The Heliopolitan cosmogony begins here, at the dawn of time, in the depths of none. From this watery abyss, Atum emerged, self-created on the first land that rose from the waters, the primeval mound. Imagine this land, dark and untouched by human hands, rising up like a small island from the vast ocean, symbolizing the first appearance of Earth, the beginning of all life. This primeval mound was no ordinary landmass. It was the Benben, the sacred stone that represented creation itself. It stood as a symbol of life emerging from chaos, much like how the fertile lands of Egypt would appear after the Nile's annual flood. Atum's emergence from none and his self-creation marked the beginning of order in the world. Unlike many creation myths where gods are born of other gods, Atum created himself, an act that was deeply symbolic. Atum didn't need a parent or a progenitor. He was the beginning, representing the force of creation itself. He willed existence into being through his thoughts and words, a concept that the Egyptians viewed as both powerful and divine. Atum's self-creation began with a simple act, his first breath. From this breath, Atum gave birth to Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. They were the first divine couple, representing two of the essential elements needed to sustain life. Shu's air separated the heavens from the earth, creating the space for all things to exist, while Tefnut's moisture brought the rains that nourished the land, ensuring that life would thrive. But what was more significant about this creation was not just the birth of these gods, it was the separation of the elements. In the beginning, the sky and the earth were one, unified and undifferentiated. But the creation of Shu and Tefnut caused a separation. The heavens, Nut, were split from the earth, Geb, bringing balance and order to the universe. This act of separation was a profound symbol of the cosmic balance that Egyptians believed was required for everything to exist. The land of Egypt, where the Pharaoh ruled, was seen as the center of this cosmic order, ensuring that life, agriculture, and divine rule remained in balance. After their creation, Shu and Tefnut ventured away from their father Atum, wandering into the chaotic waters of none. Their journey was not one of escape, but rather of separation, a symbolic act that echoed the natural cycles the Egyptians lived by. Their absence was keenly felt by Atum, and in his grief, he sent out his eye, a symbol of divine presence and protection, to find them. This separation and reunion mirrored the eternal cycles of nature that the Egyptians experienced with the Nile flood, the separation of land and water, the return of fertility, and the renewal of life. As Shu and Tefnut were finally reunited with Atum, it symbolized the return of balance and order to the cosmos, just as the Nile's flood would bring balance and fertility to the land of Egypt after the dry season. The Egyptian people saw the cycle of flooding and receding as a divine act that mirrored the gods' own cycles of birth, death, and resurrection. The primeval mound, where Atum rose from none, became one of the most powerful symbols in Egyptian culture. It was not just the land where creation began, it was the first moment of divine manifestation. The image of the mound rising from the waters served as a visual representation of how order emerged from chaos, a theme central to the Egyptian worldview. Temples, like those in Heliopolis, were built to echo this symbolism, with their pillars and towers representing the primeval mound, the place where the gods first set their foot upon the earth. The rising mound also symbolized the annual flooding of the Nile, a natural event that the Egyptians viewed as a cyclical act of creation. Just as the primeval mound emerged from the waters, so did the Nile's floodwaters bring the earth's fertility back each year, ensuring that life could continue. The Egyptians believed that the act of renewal was divine, a gift from the gods that ensured the continuation of Maat, balance, and order in their world. The self-creation of Atum and his act of bringing forth Shu and Tefnut set into motion the eternal cycle of creation, death, and rebirth that characterized Egyptian cosmology. The gods' cyclical movements, rising and setting, living and dying, were mirrored in the rhythms of nature, which the Egyptians intimately understood. This cyclical nature of life was critical to their agricultural practices, their religious rituals, and their very identity as a people. The Pharaoh, the earthly ruler, was seen as the direct representative of Horus, the son of Osiris, and he embodied the divine cycle of life, death, and renewal. Just as the gods ensured the continuous balance of the universe, the Pharaoh was responsible for maintaining Maat on earth. Through his rituals and offerings to the gods, he ensured the order of both the heavens and the earth, allowing Egypt to prosper and remain in harmony with the divine. At the heart of Egyptian mythology lies a profound understanding of life and creation, a living, breathing process that is not static but dynamic. For the ancient Egyptians, the world wasn't just created in a moment of time. Instead, creation was perpetual, continuously unfolding in a constant cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. This was especially evident in the idea that creation was tied to the body. The gods didn't just will the world into being from afar. They physically manifested creation through their own bodies. The first god, Atum, emerged from the primordial waters of Nun around 3100 BCE in a stunning act of self-creation. Atum didn't need any external force. He created himself. His first act of creation was through bodily functions. He sneezed, he spat, and through this bodily release of energy, he created Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. This image of Atum creating through his body wasn't just an abstract metaphor, it symbolized the living nature of creation. The Egyptians saw creation as organic, as something alive. The gods didn't merely speak or think the world into existence. They became the physical processes that made it all happen. Creation was something embodied, and for the Egyptians, this connected the divine to the human world in a tangible, relatable way. For example, the act of sneezing, an involuntary bodily function, was seen as an expression of life being given form. Just as when seeds are planted in fertile soil and grow, so did the gods bring forth life from their own essence. In this way, creation was not a one-time event, but a living process that was always being enacted by the gods. Creation, for the Egyptians, was not merely a distant myth. It was alive, present, and actively unfolding in the cycles of nature they observed every day. The Nile's annual flooding, which brought fertility to the land, was a direct reflection of the divine powers at work, mirroring the renewal of life and the rebirth of creation. In stark contrast to Atum's bodily creation, the Memphite theology introduces a different concept of creation through speech. a fundamental idea that would ripple through future religious thought. Around 2500 BCE, in the city of Memphis, the god Ptah was believed to have created the world through speech and thought. Unlike Adam, who physically brought forth life, Ptah used the power of words to bring the world into being. Ptah's act of creation was deeply symbolic, demonstrating the importance of Logos, the divine word, in Egyptian thought. Ptah's speech wasn't just a simple utterance. It was the will of the gods, the very force that shaped the cosmos. Ptah didn't just speak about creation. His speech was creation itself. Through the act of divine speech, Ptah breathed life into the world, shaping the very fabric of the universe through the power of his thoughts and words. This concept of creation through speech influenced later religious traditions, including Greek philosophy and Christianity. The idea of logos, the divine reason or word, which became central to the works of Heraclitus and was famously used in the Gospel of John, is a direct philosophical descendant of the Memphite theology. Ptah's creation through speech wasn't just a religious notion. It was a foundational idea that shaped how future civilizations would understand the connection between word, thought, and reality. While Atum's self-creation and Ptah's speech are perhaps the most famous creation myths, they were just parts of a larger mosaic of beliefs spread across Egypt. The myths from Hermopolis, Elephantine, and Thebes were not in competition with each other. Rather, they formed a syncretic religious system, a blend of regional and universal truths. These myths offered different perspectives on creation, but ultimately pointed to the same cosmic truth: the divine forces that govern life, death, and the cyclical nature of the universe. In Hermopolis, modern-day El Ashmunain, the creation story revolves around the Ogdoad, a group of 8 primordial gods representing the forces of creation. The Ogdoad consisted of 4 male gods, such as Nun, representing chaos, and Ha, representing infinity, and 4 female goddesses, like Nornet, representing the primordial waters, and Huhet, embodying infinity. The creation process in Hermopolis was marked by the coming together of opposites, a merging of the masculine and feminine forces that gave birth to the world. This myth emphasized duality and balance, ideas that were central to Egyptian thought. Further south, in Elephantine, near the Nubian border, the god Khnum played a central role in creation. Khnum was believed to have created humans and the world on his potter's wheel, fashioning the bodies of gods and men from clay. This hands-on creation myth offered a more personal and craft-based view of the divine process, suggesting that creation was not only a divine act of will or speech, but also a hands-on, crafted work. Meanwhile, in Thebes, Amun was venerated as the god of hidden creation, his role becoming more pronounced in the New Kingdom, around 1550 BCE. Amun's creation story differed in that it emphasized invisibility and the unseen power behind creation. Amun represented the air that was present but not always visible, making him a symbol of the invisible forces of the universe, those that were hidden but essential. Over time, Amun would merge with Ra, the sun god, creating the Amun-Ra deity, a union of the hidden and manifest aspects of creation. The beauty of Egyptian mythology lies in its ability to adapt and integrate. The myths of Atum, Ptah, Khnum, and the Ogdoad were not contradictory. They were different expressions of the same cosmic truths. These stories offered multiple perspectives on creation, but all pointed to the same divine forces, the powers of order, renewal, and cosmic harmony. They were part of a living and dynamic system that reflected the Egyptians' deep understanding of life, death, and the eternal cycles of nature. Each creation myth, whether from Heliopolis, Memphis, or Elephantine, was tied to the land's geography, climate, and culture. The Egyptians did not see their beliefs as static or limited to one version of truth. Rather, they embraced diversity in their religious system, allowing different gods and myths to coexist as complementary forces, ensuring a unified spiritual landscape. This flexibility and inclusivity in the Egyptian religious system is what allowed it to thrive for thousands of years. In ancient Egypt, the very fabric of life was woven into the cosmic journey of the sun god Ra. Imagine standing on the banks of the Nile River, where each morning you witness the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. This light was no ordinary sunrise. It was the rebirth of Ra, the most powerful god in the Egyptian pantheon, riding his boat through the sky. His journey wasn't just a physical one. It was a profound cosmic cycle that embodied the very principles of creation, renewal, and order that governed Egyptian life. For the Egyptians, the movement of Ra across the sky wasn't just about the passage of time. It was about the maintenance of balance in the universe. The Egyptians lived in a world where order and chaos were constantly in tension, and Ra's daily journey was the act of reaffirming order every single day. At dawn, Ra began his journey as Khepri, the god of the rising sun, often depicted as a scarab beetle. In this form, Ra represented the potential of life, just as the scarab beetle rolls the sun across the sky, symbolizing rebirth. This was more than just the rising of the sun. It was the act of renewing the world, bringing back light, warmth, and energy after the darkness of night. Ra's appearance as Khepri was a powerful reminder to Egyptians that every day was a new beginning, a chance for rebirth, a constant renewal of life, much like the flooding of the Nile that rejuvenated the land each year. By midday, Ra reached his zenith, fully realized as Ra, the full sun, the giver of life. At this moment, the world was bathed in his light, and his power was at its peak. The Egyptians viewed this as a time when cosmic balance was at its strongest. The pharaohs, who were seen as the earthly embodiment of Ra, would perform their daily rituals to reinforce their connection to the divine and ensure that the order of Maat, truth and balance, would prevail. Ra's midday journey represented cosmic order and authority, just as the pharaoh embodied these qualities on earth. But as the day wore on, Ra's journey took him towards the horizon, where he would begin his descent into the underworld. At sunset, Ra transformed into Atum, the aged, setting sun, taking on the symbolism of wisdom and death. In the darkness of night, Ra would journey through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, where he faced trials and challenges from forces of chaos, most notably the fearsome serpent Apep, who sought to swallow Ra and plunge the world into eternal darkness. This journey wasn't just a cosmic event, it was a deeply meaningful part of Egyptian religion. It mirrored their understanding of life, death, and rebirth. The idea that even in the face of death, there is a rebirth, a renewal. Just as Ra descended into the underworld, the soul of every Egyptian would journey through the Duat after death, facing trials and ultimately seeking rebirth, much like Ra's nightly transformation. While Ra's journey across the sky represented the cosmic renewal of life, his nightly battle with Apep symbolized the ongoing struggle between order and chaos, a central theme in Egyptian belief. Apep, the giant serpent, was the embodiment of chaos and destruction. He represented the forces of darkness, evil, and disorder that threatened to disrupt the balance of the cosmos. Every night, as Ra entered the Duat, Apep would attempt to stop him, to swallow him, and plunge the world into eternal night. threatening to reverse the natural cycle of life and death. This wasn't just a nightly struggle, it was a profound symbolic conflict that had deep significance for the Egyptians. It represented their constant fight against chaos, not just in the cosmic realms but also in their daily lives. The Egyptians lived with the belief that life was fragile, and it took constant vigilance to maintain Maat, the divine order that balanced the forces of creation and destruction. Apep's attack on Ra symbolized the forces of disorder that threatened Egyptian society and the natural world. To ensure Ra's victory, the Egyptians performed daily rituals, magical practices, and spells to ward off the serpent's power. These rituals were an integral part of Egyptian life. They weren't just stories of the gods, but active, ongoing practices that connected the world of the divine to the everyday world of the Egyptians. One of the most famous texts associated with these rituals is the Book of Overthrowing Apep, a collection of magical spells used by priests and royal scribes to protect the sun god. These spells were believed to have the power to ward off Apep's destructive influence, ensuring that the sun would rise again and that order would be restored. In these rituals, Ra's battle with Apep wasn't just a myth. It was something that Egyptians actively participated in every day. The Pharaoh, as the living embodiment of Ra on earth, would also perform these rituals. His participation in the cosmic battle ensured that order was maintained, that chaos would be kept at bay, and that the sun would rise again. In this way, the Pharaoh became a cosmic protector, working with the divine to ensure that life, order, and balance were upheld in the land of Egypt. The daily journey of Ra and his battle with Apep were not simply events in the heavens. They were rituals that were ritualized and enacted on earth. Each day, the priests of Ra would perform specific spells and incantations to assist Ra in his journey. Temples dedicated to Ra, such as the Grand Temple of Ra at Heliopolis, were places where these rituals took place. The priests would recite magical texts, make offerings, and perform sacred rites to help Ra defeat Apep and ensure the sun's safe passage through the underworld. Even the royal family, as representatives of Ra on earth, took part in these daily spiritual practices. The pharaohs, who ruled Egypt with divine authority, were not just political leaders. They were spiritual guardians, whose role was to ensure the continuous renewal of life and the protection of order against the forces of chaos. Their participation in rituals related to Ra's journey reflected their cosmic duty to protect Egypt from disorder and maintain the balance of the universe. The daily journey of Ra and his nightly battle with Apep were much more than religious tales. They were the cornerstone of Egyptian cosmology. Every morning, Ra's rise symbolized renewal and life, while his descent into the underworld each night represented the inevitable cycle of death and rebirth. The Egyptians understood that without the constant victory over chaos, life itself would cease to exist. Ra's battle was the perpetual fight to maintain Maat, the divine order, against the forces of Apep, the serpent of destruction. In the daily rituals, the Egyptians weren't merely observing a divine battle, they were participating in it, ensuring that order prevailed and that cosmic renewal continued uninterrupted. This constant renewal, whether through Ra's journey, the pharaoh's actions, or the rituals of the people, was the foundation of Egyptian society, a society deeply tied to cycles of life, death, and rebirth. The Egyptians didn't just worship the sun god, they actively worked alongside him, ensuring that his light would continue to shine, both in the heavens and on earth. Picture yourself standing on the banks of the Nile River in ancient Egypt. The day is just beginning, and the first rays of sunlight stretch across the horizon. As the sun rises, you know that Ra, the sun god, has just begun his journey across the sky, a journey that, for the Egyptians, represented more than just the movement of the sun. It was the eternal dance of life, death, and rebirth that governed the entire cosmos. Ra's journey was not merely an astronomical event. It was a cosmic ritual that mirrored the very rhythm of human existence. Every day, Ra traveled from dawn to dusk, crossing the heavens in a divine boat, and his movements symbolized the flow of time itself. This journey was seen as a continuous cycle of renewal, much like the annual flooding of the Nile, which brought fertility and life to Egypt. The Egyptians viewed this daily passage as a rebirth of the sun, much like how the land itself would be reborn after the floods. At dawn, Ra began his journey as Khepri, the scarab god. Just as the scarab beetle rolls the ball of dung, Ra's journey symbolized the rebirth of the sun from the darkness of night. The first light of day was seen as a divine creation, a new beginning, full of potential and possibility. The Egyptians didn't just observe the sun's rise. They believed it was a symbol of the renewal of life, and it marked a new opportunity for the soul to begin again in accordance with the principles of Maat, the divine order and truth that govern both the cosmos and human conduct. As Ra moved higher in the sky, he transformed into his full, radiant self, Ra at midday. This was the sun at its peak, symbolizing full power, life-giving energy, and cosmic authority. The sun's heat bathed the earth, nourishing the land and sustaining all life. In this phase, Ra embodied the very essence of creation. He was not only the life-giver, but also the ruler of the universe. The Pharaoh, as the earthly embodiment of Ra, was thought to represent this power and authority. Just as Ra maintained order in the sky, the Pharaoh's role was to uphold Maat on earth, ensuring balance and prosperity for the kingdom. By sunset, Ra's energy began to wane, and he entered the realm of the underworld, becoming Atum, the aged sun god. This phase of his journey represented the inevitability of death and the wisdom that comes with age. The descent of Ra into the Duat, the Egyptian afterlife, was a powerful metaphor for the human soul's journey into the afterlife. In this moment, Ra's passage through the underworld was also symbolic of the death and rebirth cycle that governed both the cosmos and the human soul. Every evening, as Ra descended into the Duat, he faced his greatest adversary, Apep, the serpent of chaos. Apep represented all the forces that sought to undo the natural order, darkness, disorder, and destruction. His ultimate goal was to swallow the sun and prevent Ra from completing his journey, thus plunging the world into eternal darkness and chaos. The Egyptians saw this battle not just as a celestial struggle, but as a metaphor for the eternal fight between order and chaos. The cosmic balance upheld by Ra, Maat, and the other gods was constantly under threat, and this daily battle was symbolic of the forces that threatened to disrupt the harmony of life. Apep, much like the forces of chaos on earth, sought to destroy the order that allowed life to flourish. Ra's nightly struggle with Apep wasn't merely a mythological event. It was ritualized in Egyptian religious practices. Magical formulas, spells, and prayers were recited by priests to ensure Ra's victory over the serpent and to ward off chaos. One of the key texts used in these rituals was the Book of Overthrowing Apep, a series of spells designed to protect Ra and ensure that the sun would rise again the next day. These rituals were seen as actively participating in the cosmic struggle. By performing them, the Egyptians believed they could help maintain Maat and prevent Apep from unleashing chaos upon the world. For the pharaoh, this battle had profound significance. As the earthly representative of Ra, it was the pharaoh's role to ensure that Maat was upheld, both through governance and rituals. By performing rituals that honored Ra's journey and ensured his victory over Apep, the pharaoh participated in the cosmic order, reaffirming the balance between life and death, light and darkness, and order and chaos. The Egyptians saw Ra's journey across the sky as more than a cosmic event. It was a profound metaphor for the human soul's potential for eternal life. Just as Ra was reborn every morning, so too did the human soul have the potential to be reborn after death. The Egyptians believed that the soul's ability to join Ra in the afterlife depended on its adherence to Maat, the principle of balance, truth, and order. This connection between Ra's cycle and the human soul was central to Egyptian funerary practices. The daily renewal of the sun mirrored the hope that the deceased would be reborn in the afterlife, achieving eternal life through proper living and the performance of rituals. Egyptians believed that rituals performed by the living, whether in the temples or in private homes, helped ensure that Ra's light would reach the deceased, allowing them to pass through the duat and be reborn in the field of reeds, the Egyptian version of paradise. Just as Ra faced challenges in the duat, the deceased soul was believed to face trials after death. Apep, representing chaos, was believed to hinder the soul's journey, and the soul had to overcome these obstacles to reach the afterlife. The weighing of the heart ceremony, where the heart of the deceased was weighed against the feather of Maat, symbolized the soul's judgment. Only those who lived a life in accordance with Maat could proceed to eternal life, joining Ra in his daily renewal cycle. Ra's daily journey wasn't just a symbol for the cosmos, it represented a model for human existence. The Egyptians saw the sun's rebirth each day as a reflection of their own potential for immortality. By living a life in accordance with Maat, they believed they could achieve eternal life, just as Ra is reborn each morning. This belief in the rebirth of the sun offered hope, not just for the afterlife, but for daily renewal in the human experience. Through rituals, prayers, and the guidance of the Pharaoh, the Egyptians connected their earthly existence to the celestial journey of Ra. In doing so, they ensured that Maat would prevail, and that the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth would continue uninterrupted. In the rich and vibrant landscape of ancient Egypt, the gods were not abstract figures of worship. They were deeply intertwined with the rhythms of nature and society. Among them, Osiris was one of the most powerful and beloved deities. Revered for millennia, Osiris embodied not only fertility and the agricultural cycles, but also the afterlife and rebirth, making him a god who bridged the realms of the living and the dead. Osiris's story is more than just mythology. It was central to the Egyptian worldview, offering a profound reflection of the cycle of life and death, the very essence of nature itself. For the ancient Egyptians, the Nile River was a constant reminder of life's cycles. The Nile, which flooded annually and deposited fertile soil, brought life to the land. This flooding of the Nile was seen as the tears of Isis, mourning the death of Osiris, and symbolized Osiris's death and resurrection. Just as the floodwaters of the Nile brought new life each year, Osiris's myth mirrored this cycle of fertility, death, and renewal. At the heart of this myth was the connection between Osiris and the land's fertility. As the god of agriculture, Osiris ensured that the earth was nourished and life-giving, just as the Nile's floodwaters would recede and leave fertile fields behind. Each grain harvested or crops planted were thought to be blessed by Osiris, his blessings inscribed upon the soil itself. His agricultural role linked him directly to Egypt's farming practices, where he symbolized the rebirth of crops, much like his own eventual resurrection after death. Though Osiris's roots were firmly planted in the realm of fertility, his role evolved significantly over time. By around 2600 BCE, Osiris had transformed into the god of the afterlife, symbolizing death, judgment, and rebirth in the Egyptian belief system. This evolution was not arbitrary. It reflected the Egyptians' understanding of life and death as a continuous, interwoven cycle. Just as the land was brought to life through Osiris's influence during the flooding of the Nile, Osiris himself became the god who ensured that death was not the end, but a transformation, a step toward eternal renewal. In his new form, Osiris became the ruler of the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, presiding over the weighing of the heart ceremony, where the dead were judged by their deeds in life. The heart of the deceased would be weighed against the feather of Maat, the symbol of truth, balance, and justice. Those who lived in accordance with Maat were granted access to the field of reeds, an idyllic afterlife, where they would live eternally. But for those who had lived in chaos, in defiance of Maat, their hearts would be devoured by the demon Ammit, consigning them to eternal oblivion. Osiris's transition from a fertility god to the ruler of the afterlife was not just symbolic of the circularity of life and death, but of the enduring belief that the gods were active participants in every phase of existence. In this way, Osiris's transformation embodied the Egyptians' conviction that the death of one phase led to the rebirth of another, whether on the farmer's fields or in the journey of the soul. Osiris's story, however, is not without tragedy. The betrayal by his brother, Set, the god of chaos, represents the dark force that threatens the cosmic balance of life. Set, in his jealousy of Osiris's popularity and divine rule, sought to usurp Osiris's throne. He tricked Osiris into lying inside a beautifully crafted wooden chest and then sealed it, casting it into the Nile River, where it was carried away, drowning Osiris. This act of betrayal and the murder of Osiris symbolizes the eternal conflict between order and chaos that was central to Egyptian thought. While Osiris embodied order, justice, and renewal, Set embodied the forces of disruption, violence, and chaos. Set's actions represented the disruption of cosmic harmony, where the forces of nature, destruction, and disorder sought to undo the divine order maintained by Osiris and the gods. Set's role as a god of chaos was critical in Egyptian religion. His very existence allowed Egyptians to understand the need for balance, where for every force of creation, there must be a counterforce of destruction. Set's betrayal, however, was not the end of the story. The death of Osiris symbolized the cyclical nature of life, the inevitable reality of death, but also the promise of resurrection and rebirth. It is in this cycle of renewal that Osiris found his ultimate power. His death and dismemberment at the hands of Set would eventually lead to his resurrection through the efforts of his wife, Isis, who reassembled his body and used powerful magic to conceive their son, Horus. The resurrection of Osiris is perhaps the most significant part of his myth. Osiris, having been torn apart and scattered across Egypt, was reassembled by his wife Isis, who used her divine magic to bring him back to life. This event marked Osiris's rebirth, a powerful symbol of eternal life and the triumph of order over chaos. The Egyptians believed that, just as Osiris was reborn, so could they be reborn in the afterlife, if they lived righteously and maintained Maat in their hearts. Osiris's resurrection symbolized the renewal of all life, and it was central to the Egyptians' belief in the afterlife. Through the myth of Osiris, the Egyptians understood that death was not an end, but a necessary transition, a part of the eternal cycle of existence. For the pharaoh, Osiris's story held particular significance. As the living representation of Horus, the son of Osiris, the pharaoh was seen as a divine ruler whose death and rebirth ensured the continuation of order on earth. This was the cornerstone of Egyptian kingship. The pharaoh's resurrection was symbolized by Osiris's own return, ensuring that the cycle of life, death, and renewal continued. Just as the sun rose each day, bringing the promise of new life to the land. The story of Osiris, from his role as the god of fertility to his tragic betrayal and resurrection, is one of Egypt's most profound myths, encapsulating the very essence of their beliefs about life, death, and eternal renewal. It illustrates the Egyptians' understanding that death is not a finality, but a necessary part of a cyclical process. The constant ebb and flow of creation, destruction, and rebirth that governed not only the Nile River, but the lives of the Egyptians themselves. Osiris's myth mirrors the agricultural cycles of Egypt, the journey of the soul in the afterlife, and the pharaoh's divine role as a protector of cosmic balance. His transformation from agriculture god to ruler of the dead highlights the Egyptians' belief in the interconnectedness of life and death, a belief that continues to resonate as a central pillar of Egyptian spirituality. Through Osiris, the Egyptians found hope in the face of death, assurance in the face of chaos, and the promise of eternal life through the proper living and rituals that connected them to the divine. In ancient Egyptian mythology, Osiris was revered as a god who governed both the fertility of the land and the afterlife, making him central to both the daily lives of Egyptians and their spiritual beliefs. Osiris's story was not merely one of divine power, it was symbolic of the cyclical nature of life and death, a cycle that was reflected in the Nile's annual flood, a life-giving force that would, much like Osiris's influence, rebirth Egypt each year. The Nile's flooding was seen as the divine act of Osiris weeping for his death, and from his tears came the fertile soil that would nourish the crops. Osiris's death and resurrection mirrored the very rhythms of agriculture, death in the winter months, the receding of the Nile, and rebirth in the spring, the fertile soil left behind after the waters receded. This natural renewal echoed in Osiris's role as the god of the afterlife. In Egyptian belief, Osiris's resurrection symbolized eternal life, offering a model for the human soul's potential rebirth. Isis, Osiris's devoted wife, was the central figure in restoring Osiris after his betrayal and death. She was not just a wife in the human sense. She embodied the sacred duty of restoration. Through her magic and unwavering devotion, she reassembled Osiris's body, and through this act, she became the symbol of resilience. Her magical abilities were not only vital for restoring Osiris, but represented the spiritual and practical power that the Egyptians believed could transform life, death, and the very elements of their existence. Set, the god of chaos, storms, and destruction, embodied the forces that threatened to undo the divine order established by Osiris. Set's jealousy and lust for power were the driving forces behind his betrayal of Osiris. In a grand feast, Set enticed Osiris to lie inside a beautifully decorated wooden chest, which he then sealed and cast into the Nile River. This act of betrayal reflected the struggle between order and chaos that was central to Egyptian cosmology. Set's actions were symbolic of the forces that sought to disrupt the natural order, the chaos that exists in every society, threatening to undo the balance that keeps things functioning. The murder of Osiris wasn't just an event, it was a cosmic upheaval, disrupting the harmony between life and death, order and disorder. Set's act represented the darkness that periodically descends upon the world, but it also emphasized the importance of the restorative powers of the gods to bring the world back into balance. This myth spoke directly to the Egyptian people's relationship with death and resurrection. In a world where life was often fragile, the Egyptians understood that death was a natural part of the cycle, but so too was renewal and rebirth. Just as the Nile flooded every year, so did Osiris's resurrection promise that no matter the chaos, order would always return. With Osiris's death, the throne of Egypt was left vacant, and thus began the legendary struggle between Horus, the son of Osiris, and Set for control of Egypt. This battle was not merely a physical contest. It was an epic struggle that symbolized the very nature of kingship itself. Horus, the young god of kingship, represented the principles of justice, order, and legitimate succession. Set, on the other hand, represented chaos, rebellion, and disorder. Their battle was not only fought in the physical realm, it was a battle of legitimacy, rooted in the divine principles of kingship. In one key mythical battle, Horus and Set fought over the right to rule, each god testing his strength and wisdom in various trials. Set, ever the trickster, used deceit and treachery to try and undermine Horus. But Horus, representing the divine right to rule, overcame these challenges, proving that order, embodied by Horus, was the rightful force to lead Egypt. This conflict between Horus and Set became symbolic of the struggle for legitimate kingship. The pharaoh was seen as Horus's earthly representative, and his ability to rule was seen as a reflection of his divine right to maintain Maat, or cosmic order. This battle set the standard for kingship in Egypt, an unbroken chain of divine rulers who were legitimate because they followed the divine principles of order, justice, and truth. The final victory of Horus over Set marked the ultimate triumph of order, symbolized by Horus, over chaos, represented by Set. Horus's triumph wasn't just about defeating his uncle, it was about the restoration of balance in the world. In Egyptian religion, the victory of order was paramount, and Horus's success symbolized the reassertion of cosmic balance in Egypt. His victory meant that Maat would be upheld, that the pharaoh's divine right to rule was secure, and that the land of Egypt would continue to thrive in prosperity and peace. Horus's victory also marked the beginning of a new era, the restoration of peace and justice after the chaos brought on by Set. As the god of kingship, Horus was seen as the ideal ruler who embodied the qualities necessary to maintain cosmic order: wisdom, strength, justice, and divine will. With Horus on the throne, the Egyptians believed they would remain in harmony with the gods, ensuring that Egypt's spiritual, economic, and cultural systems would continue to flourish. The myth of Horus and Set encapsulated the core of Egyptian belief, that life, death, and renewal were part of an eternal cycle. Through Horus's triumph, the Egyptians were reminded that order would always prevail over chaos, that legitimate kingship rooted in divine right would ensure the prosperity of the land, and that the cycle of life and rebirth would continue forever. This myth provided not only a framework for the divine role of the pharaoh, but also an eternal message. No matter how many times chaos tries to disrupt the world, order, like Horus, will always rise to restore balance. In the grand, eternal landscape of Egyptian belief, the afterlife wasn't simply an afterthought, it was the very foundation of their worldview. Central to this was the idea that the soul was not a singular entity, but a collection of interconnected parts, each playing an essential role in the cosmic journey after death. This complex structure of the soul was comprised of the Ka, the Ba, and the Akh, which worked together to ensure an individual's safe passage from life to the afterlife. The Ka was the life force, the spiritual double, created at the time of birth. The Egyptians believed that every person had a Ka, and it was inseparable from their vitality and existence. During life, the Ka resided within the body, and after death, it would continue to dwell near the tomb of the deceased, as if it were a guardian spirit, ensuring that the person's essence remained intact. The Ka could not survive without the body, so it was essential to preserve the body through mummification. The Ka's role extended beyond the tomb, as the living family members would leave offerings of food, drinks, and luxuries at the tomb to sustain the Ka. These offerings were vital because the Ka could not live without sustenance. This practice was deeply ritualized, and the Ka's well-being was essential for ensuring that the soul could journey into the afterlife. Without the Ka, there was no continuation, and the soul would not achieve eternity. The Ba, the personality and individual essence of a person, was represented as a human-headed bird. It was the part of the soul that could leave the tomb and wander, but it was also deeply connected to the physical world. The Ba's power to leave the body symbolized the freedom of the soul, but it was not free in the sense of being entirely unbound. The Ba needed to return to the tomb to find rest and communion with the physical remains. It was this connection to the dead body and the living descendants that allowed the Ba to transcend the physical realm and journey toward the afterlife. The Ba's role was especially poignant during the weighing of the heart ritual, where the Ba symbolized the soul's true moral essence, the sum of all actions, decisions, and ethical choices made during life. It was through the Ba that the soul's individual character would be judged in the Hall of Two Truths, determining whether the soul would be worthy of eternal peace or eternal destruction. The Ach, the final and most perfected aspect of the soul, was the immortal part that had undergone transformation after death. This part of the soul achieved divinity, existing in harmony with the gods. Only through the proper rituals, living by Maat, and living an ethically sound life, could the soul achieve the status of Ach, where it would join the divine order in the field of reeds, a paradise free from the sufferings of mortal life. This transformation from the Ba to the Ach was essential for eternity. Without achieving Ach status, the soul would remain in a liminal state, neither fully mortal nor fully divine, and would not reach its ultimate destination. The Egyptians understood this transformation as part of their spiritual quest. Through living in harmony with divine law, maintaining balance, and understanding the cycles of life and death, one could ultimately become immortal, transcending both physical death and spiritual limbo. The weighing of the heart in the Hall of Two Truths was one of the most significant rituals in the Egyptian afterlife journey. Here, the deceased's heart, the center of their being, was placed on a scale opposite the feather of Maat, the goddess of truth and cosmic balance. The heart, symbolizing the person's moral integrity, would be judged against the feather, a symbol of the universal truth that governed the cosmos. This ritual was not just about judging morality, it was a profound test of the cosmic order. The Egyptians believed that the entire universe was maintained through balance, Maat, and that any disruption to this order would bring about chaos. The heart, weighed against the feather, had to balance perfectly for the soul to pass into the field of reeds and join the gods. If the heart was heavy with sin, representing the soul's failure to uphold Maat, the soul would be devoured by Ammit, a terrifying creature with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. This meant the soul's complete annihilation, preventing it from ever achieving eternal life. The ritual was more than just a moral test. It was the foundation of Egyptian society. Maat, as a principle, was central to Egyptian kingship, the law, and daily life. By ensuring that the deceased had lived according to the tenets of Maat, the ritual reinforced the importance of justice, balance, and truth as governing principles for both individual conduct and societal health. The journey of the soul in the Egyptian afterlife was a complex and deeply ritualized process. It was not just about surviving death, it was about ensuring immortality through the fulfillment of divine order. The Ka, Ba, and Ach worked together in a system of balance, ensuring that each soul could achieve peace and eternal harmony with the gods. The weighing of the heart was the final test of one's worthiness to join the divine realm, symbolizing the ultimate triumph of order over chaos and truth over deception. For the ancient Egyptians, the afterlife was a mirror of life itself. The soul's ability to live according to Maat, to maintain balance in life, and to respect the divine order determined its fate in the afterlife. By living with purpose, honesty, and integrity, Egyptians believed they could ensure that their Ka, Ba, and Ach would continue into eternity, achieving the ultimate reward of immortality. The ancient Egyptians believed in an afterlife that was not merely a spiritual continuation, but a journey that mirrored the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. At the heart of this journey was the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, a realm where the soul passed through many trials and tribulations before reaching its final resting place in the field of reeds, the Egyptian version of paradise. But the Duat was not a place of peace. It was a dangerous, labyrinthine world. Souls that passed into this domain faced dangers at every turn, from terrifying serpents and monsters to the forces of chaos that constantly threatened to undo the order of the universe. Set, the god of chaos, was said to reside in the Duat, and his influence was felt throughout the journey. But unlike the physical world, where Set represented disruption, in the Duat, his presence was the challenge the soul had to overcome to prove its worthiness for the eternal life that awaited. The Book of the Dead was the essential tool for the deceased, often inscribed on papyrus or painted in the tombs. These spells and incantations acted as the guidebook for navigating the Duat. In a way, the Book of the Dead was an instruction manual for eternal life, providing not only prayers and rites, but also magical spells to protect the soul from danger. For Egyptians, the physical tomb was equally important. Hieroglyphs, images, and ritual tools, inscribed on walls and stone, ensured that the soul's journey through the Duat could be guided and protected by the gods. Before a soul could enter the Duat, it had to be protected and prepared. The ancient Egyptians believed that the soul consisted of several parts, Ka, Ba, and Ach, each playing a vital role in the soul's journey and ultimate fate. The Ka was the life force that remained with the deceased. It was tied to the body and needed sustenance to survive in the afterlife. Without the Ka, the deceased could not enjoy eternity, as it was linked to the very essence of the person's spiritual vitality. Offerings placed in the tomb, including food, drink, and symbolic objects, nourished the Ka and ensured that the soul remained intact. The Ba, symbolized as a human-headed bird, was the personality and unique essence of the individual. It was capable of traveling freely, wandering between the underworld and the living world, and returning to the tomb to commune with the Ka. But if the Ba did not achieve peace, it was lost, forever wandering between the worlds. The Ach was the transcendent, perfected soul, which could join the gods in the afterlife. The Ach could only be attained by a soul that had passed through the tests of judgment, living a life in accordance with Maat, the divine principle of truth and justice. Achieving Ach status was seen as the final goal, the ultimate reward for living a life of moral integrity and balance. At the core of Egyptian afterlife beliefs was Osiris, the god of the dead, who ruled over the Duat and judge the souls of the departed. Osiris was not just a god of death, but a symbol of life, death, and resurrection. His role was crucial because it connected the living Pharaoh to the divine realm of the afterlife. The Pharaoh, during his reign, was believed to be the living embodiment of Horus, the god of kingship and protector of Egypt. But upon death, the Pharaoh was thought to undergo a transformation and became Osiris, the god who governed the world of the dead. This transformation from Horus to Osiris was a powerful representation of the Pharaoh's divine right to rule Egypt, both in the living world and beyond. In death, the Pharaoh was reborn as Osiris, symbolizing that the king's authority was eternal, even beyond the grave. The Pharaoh's role was not just to rule the physical kingdom, but to ensure that the cosmic order was maintained through rituals and offerings that connected the human realm to the divine. In the Hall of Two Truths, after passing through the duat, the soul stood before Osiris to be judged. This was the most critical moment of the journey, the weighing of the heart. The heart, a symbol of the individual's moral choices, was placed on a scale, balanced against the feather of Maat, the goddess of truth and justice. The heart represented the person's actions during life, the good and the bad, and was the measure by which their soul would be judged. If the heart was light as the feather, this meant the soul had lived in accordance with Maat, the cosmic balance that kept the universe in order. The soul would be granted passage to the field of reeds, a paradise where the deceased could live in eternal peace. However, if the heart was heavy with sin, weighed down by lies, deceit, or evil, the soul would fail the test. It would then be consumed by Maat, the devourer of souls, a creature of horrific appearance. This fate marked eternal destruction, a permanent end to the soul's existence. The weighing of the heart symbolized the Egyptians' ethical framework, that life was about balance, truth, and justice. It was not just a ritual, but a philosophical reflection on the importance of living a righteous life and maintaining Maat in every action. As Osiris ruled the afterlife, the Pharaoh was seen as the earthly mediator between the living and the divine. The Pharaoh's role was to maintain order, Maat, on earth, ensuring that Egypt thrived and remained in favor with the gods. Upon death, the Pharaoh would undergo the transformation into Osiris, ensuring that the Pharaoh's divine role continued even after their death. This cyclical nature of the Pharaoh's divinity reflected the Egyptians' understanding of life and death, that one would always give way to the other, but that both were interconnected in the eternal cycle of existence. In this way, the Pharaoh was not just a political leader, he was a divine figure, both in life and in death, and his transformation into Osiris reinforced the idea that kingship was sacred and eternal. The journey through the duat was more than a myth. It was a reflection of the moral, spiritual, and cultural framework of ancient Egypt. Through their beliefs in the Ka, Ba, and Ach, and their understanding of the afterlife, the Egyptians viewed death as part of the cosmic cycle, with each individual soul playing a role in maintaining balance and order. The Pharaoh's role as Horus in life and Osiris in death symbolized the continuity of divine kingship, that the Pharaoh's influence would never truly end, ensuring the eternal protection and prosperity of Egypt. In ancient Egypt, death was not seen as the end of existence. Rather, it was viewed as a transition, a vital journey from the mortal world to the eternal one. The Egyptians believed that the soul was immortal and needed its physical body intact to journey into the afterlife. To achieve this, they developed the ritual of mummification, a complex process that aimed not only at preserving the body, but also at ensuring the soul's safe passage into the afterlife, where it could enjoy eternal peace among the gods. Mummification was not simply about preservation. It was an elaborate act of spiritual care, deeply rooted in the Egyptians' beliefs about rebirth, resurrection, and immortality. By preserving the body, the Egyptians ensured that the deceased could be reunited with their Ka, the spiritual essence of the individual, in the afterlife. The process itself, refined over thousands of years, embodied the Egyptian commitment to eternal life, representing their unwavering belief that life did not stop at death. It transformed. The mummification process began with the careful removal of the organs, which the Egyptians believed held the vital essence necessary for the afterlife. The heart, in particular, was of immense importance. It was regarded as the seat of intelligence and the moral compass of the soul. For this reason, the heart was often left in place, as it would be weighed against the feather of Maat in the hall of judgment to determine whether the soul had lived a righteous life. However, other organs, the stomach, lungs, liver, and intestines, were removed and carefully preserved, as they were believed to play a role in the body's reanimation. After being removed, the organs were washed and dried before being placed in canopic jars, each guarded by one of the four sons of Horus, Imsidi, Hapi, Duamatef, and Kebe-Senuef. These jars were carefully sealed and placed alongside the deceased, ensuring that these essential organs would remain protected throughout their eternal journey. After the organs were removed, the body was thoroughly dehydrated to prevent decay. The embalmers would cover the body with a mixture of natron, a combination of salt, sodium carbonate, and sodium bicarbonate, which absorbed moisture and dried the body to perfection. This process could take up to 40 days, and during this time, the body would be carefully examined and cleaned. Once dehydrated, the body was treated with resins and oils, including cedar oil. This was done to seal the body, prevent any future decay, and ensure that the skin remained flexible. This stage wasn't just about preservation, it was about spiritual protection. The oils and resins were believed to repel evil spirits that might try to invade the body or soul, keeping the deceased safe as they traveled through the Duat, the underworld. Once the body had been properly preserved, the final phase of mummification began, the wrapping of the body. This step was highly ritualistic and symbolic, representing the deceased's transition into the afterlife. The body was wrapped in linen bandages, sometimes up to 1,000 yards of linen, and between each layer, amulets were placed to protect the deceased from evil forces in the afterlife. Some of the most commonly used amulets were scarabs, which symbolized rebirth and regeneration. The wrapping process was performed by embalmers and priests, who would recite prayers from the Book of the Dead, a sacred text that helped guide the deceased through the challenges of the Duat. These prayers invoked the gods, ensuring that the deceased would have the strength and protection necessary to pass the trials of the afterlife. The body was then placed in a sarcophagus, a stone or wooden container that was inscribed with prayers and symbols to safeguard the soul's journey. The act of mummification went far beyond the preservation of the body. It was a sacred act meant to ensure that the deceased would enjoy eternal life. The Egyptians believed that the body needed to be maintained intact so that the soul, specifically the Ka, could recognize it and return to it in the afterlife. Without the physical form, the soul could not live on forever, and thus the deceased would be lost in the afterlife, unable to join the gods in the field of reeds. Mummification was also an expression of divine kingship. The Pharaoh, as the representative of Horus on earth, underwent the same process as a means of reaffirming his eternal kingship. The Pharaoh's rebirth as Osiris after death ensured that the divine order, Maat, continued, and his influence would be felt long after his physical death. By mummifying the pharaoh and preserving his body, the Egyptians believed they could maintain cosmic stability. Just as the Nile flooded each year, renewing the land, the pharaoh's spiritual rebirth would ensure the renewal of Egypt. Mummification practices evolved over centuries, with early techniques being simpler, primarily involving the removal of the intestines and the drying of the body. As Egypt's religious and political systems grew more sophisticated, so did the process of mummification. By the time of the New Kingdom, 1550 to 1070 BCE, the process had reached a high level of sophistication, with elaborate tombs and elaborate rituals. Royal mummification became a symbol of divine kingship, while elite citizens also sought mummification as a way of ensuring their eternal life. The pharaoh's tomb became a monumental representation of the soul's journey, a symbol not just of his divine office, but of Egypt's broader belief in immortality. Mummification, for the Egyptians, was not merely an art of preservation. It was a spiritual practice that connected the living to the gods and the eternal realm. Mummification was an expression of the Egyptian belief in the eternal soul, one that transcended the body and continued its journey to the afterlife. Through the detailed and ritualized process of preserving the body, the Egyptians believed they could ensure that the soul would find peace, rebirth, and eternal life. Mummification was not just about physical preservation. It was about ensuring that the soul could live on, forever bound to the gods and the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. This sacred process tied the mortal realm to the divine, giving Egyptians a deep connection to the afterlife. The preservation of the body symbolized the Egyptians' commitment to maintaining order and balance, for the soul, for society, and for Egypt itself. Through mummification, the Egyptians achieved not only the preservation of the body, but the preservation of eternal life, an eternal legacy for those who believed in the gods and the divine plan for immortality. For the ancient Egyptians, death was not a sudden end, but a continuation of life, a journey through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, to achieve eternal peace in the field of reeds. But this journey was fraught with dangers, requiring the deceased to navigate through dark realms, face judgment, and eventually be reborn. To assist the deceased in overcoming these trials, the Egyptians relied on a vast array of funerary texts, a treasure trove of spells, incantations, and rituals that would protect and guide the soul through the afterlife. The most famous of these texts are the pyramid texts, coffin texts, and the Book of the Dead. But these texts were more than just religious documents. They were practical tools for ensuring the soul's safe passage and eternal life. Each of these texts evolved over time, reflecting the changing spiritual needs of the Egyptians from the Old Kingdom through to the New Kingdom. They became ritual guides, personalized for each deceased person, to ensure that their soul would face the afterlife with the divine protection it needed. The pyramid texts, dating back to the Old Kingdom around 2400 BCE, represent the first written attempts to ensure the pharaoh's eternal life. These texts were carved into the walls of the pharaoh's pyramid, specifically in the pyramids of Saqqara, and were reserved exclusively for the pharaoh and the royal family. The pyramid texts were ritualistic and exclusive, focused on ensuring the pharaoh's divine transformation. The goal was for the pharaoh to become Osiris, the god of the afterlife, and thus ensure the eternal prosperity of Egypt. For the Egyptians, the pharaoh was not just a king, but a divine ruler who had the unique ability to mediate between the living world and the gods. These texts outlined how the pharaoh's soul would travel through the afterlife, pass the weighing of the heart, and be reborn as Osiris, symbolizing the eternal continuity of Egypt's divine kingship. The spells were written to protect the pharaoh from evil forces, help him navigate the duat, and ultimately transform him into a god, ensuring that the pharaoh's reign would continue even in death. By the Middle Kingdom, around 2000 BCE, the focus on the pharaoh in the pyramid texts expanded to include the elite members of society, including nobles and officials. The coffin texts, inscribed on the interiors of coffins and tomb walls, made the knowledge of the afterlife more accessible to those outside the royal family. These texts were personalized for the deceased, providing specific spells and rituals for an individual's journey through the duat. They helped ensure that the deceased could avoid dangers, overcome obstacles, and find peace in the afterlife, much like the pharaohs had done. The coffin texts expanded the concept of the afterlife journey, making it accessible to more people, but maintaining the same fundamental goals: protection, guidance, and rebirth. Through these texts, the Egyptians expressed their belief that the afterlife was not limited to the pharaoh, but was a universal experience available to anyone who could afford the proper rituals and texts. By the time of the New Kingdom, around 1550 BCE, the Book of the Dead emerged as the most widely used funerary text in Egypt. Unlike its predecessors, the Book of the Dead was available to all, regardless of social status. Written on papyrus and placed in the tomb, it consisted of a collection of spells and rituals to guide the deceased through the afterlife. The Book of the Dead was less focused on the royal transformation into Osiris and more on personal survival in the afterlife. The Book of the Dead offered a more comprehensive approach to the afterlife journey. It detailed how to navigate the duat, avoid the monsters and dangers, and face Osiris for the final judgment. Among the most famous sections is the weighing of the heart, where the deceased's heart was judged against the feather of Maat to determine whether they had lived a righteous life. The Book of the Dead also provided instructions on how to breathe and eat in the afterlife, reinforcing the idea that the afterlife mirrored life on earth in its daily activities. For the ancient Egyptians, the tomb was not just a resting place for the deceased. It was an eternal home, a gateway to the afterlife, and a place for the soul to continue its existence. Tombs were not simply burial sites. They were carefully designed spiritual sanctuaries meant to protect the soul and ensure its comfort in the afterlife. This was especially true for royalty and the elite, whose tombs became vast, elaborate structures filled with art, offerings, and ritual objects to ensure their journey was successful. Tombs were designed to reflect the life and status of the deceased. Pharaohs and nobles had tombs that were not only enormous, but often contained elaborate paintings and carvings that depicted scenes from daily life, farming, hunting, banquets, and family gatherings. These scenes were symbolic of the Egyptians' desire for continuity after death. The deceased would continue to enjoy the same comforts they had enjoyed in life. The tomb, then, was a mirror of the living world, designed to ensure that the deceased could maintain social status, protection, and comfort in the afterlife. The ancient Egyptian belief in eternal life was reflected in every aspect of their funerary practices. The pyramid texts, coffin texts, and Book of the Dead served as vital guides for the soul's journey, ensuring that the deceased would be equipped with the rituals and spells necessary to navigate the afterlife. These texts were part of a broader spiritual framework that believed the afterlife was a continuation of life on earth, and they helped the deceased maintain continuity with their families, their roles in society, and the divine. The tombs and their artwork further emphasized this belief, ensuring that the deceased would live eternally in the field of reeds, where they could continue their existence in the company of gods, family, and community. The sacred rituals that accompanied death were not just about physical preservation. They were about ensuring that the soul's journey to eternity was both protected and nurtured. Through these practices, the Egyptians demonstrated their unwavering belief in rebirth, immortality, and the enduring cycle of life and death. In ancient Egypt, Maat was far more than just a goddess. She was the personification of truth, balance, and order, the very forces that govern the universe, society, and moral life. Represented as a woman with an ostrich feather atop her head, Maat was seen as the eternal principle that maintained the cosmic order. Without her, chaos would reign, and the universe itself would unravel. For the Egyptians, Maat was the glue that bound the cosmos and human existence together, ensuring that life, death, and everything in between occurred in harmony. Maat's symbolism was universal. She was not just a divine force overseeing the gods, but also a guiding principle for pharaohs, priests, and common people alike. Maat was everything from the stability of the Nile's flooding to the balance in the heavens, from the tactile laws of nature to the ethical codes governing human conduct. This understanding of cosmic balance gave Egyptian society a moral compass, guiding not only the king, but the everyday lives of the people. Maat was deeply tied to the gods who embodied various aspects of balance in the universe. Ra, the sun god, was one of the primary gods associated with Maat. Each day, as Ra sailed his solar bark across the sky, he symbolized the eternal cycle of order and rebirth. The daily rising and setting of the sun was more than just an astronomical event. It was a manifestation of Maat in action. Just as the sun rose every morning to chase away the chaos of the night, so too did Maat ensure that cosmic forces would always renew, never collapsing into disorder. But Ra's work didn't stop with the sun. He was the one who fought Apophis, the serpent of chaos, every night in his journey through the Duat. This battle symbolized the continuous effort to maintain balance in the universe. Without Ra's daily victory, the world would fall into darkness and chaos. Similarly, Osiris, the god of death and rebirth, played a crucial role in ensuring that the soul would be reborn in the afterlife, maintaining the cosmic order even after death. His ability to rise again after being murdered by Set symbolized the eternal cycle of life and death, showing that no matter what, balance and order would always return. Osiris's resurrection was the ultimate symbol of Maat, a cycle of continuous renewal that ensured that chaos never triumphed. In Egyptian society, the pharaoh was not just the king of Egypt. He was the living embodiment of Maat. As the divine ruler of the land, the pharaoh's primary role was to maintain the cosmic order on earth. He was seen as the mediator between the gods and the people, ensuring that Maat's principles of truth, justice, and balance were upheld in both spiritual and worldly affairs. The pharaoh was believed to be the living Horus, the god of the sky and kingship. As Horus, the pharaoh was responsible for ensuring the stability of Egypt, overseeing the flooding of the Nile, a symbol of Maat's renewal, and ensuring prosperity for the people. But upon death, the pharaoh would transform into Osiris, the god of the afterlife, ensuring that Egypt's divine kingship continued even after death. The pharaoh's duty to maintain Maat was carried out through rituals and ceremonies that were central to Egyptian life. One of the most important of these rituals was the Heb-Sed festival, a royal ceremony held after the pharaoh had ruled for 30 years. During the Heb-Sed, the pharaoh would run a symbolic race to demonstrate that he was still fit to rule and had the divine strength to uphold Maat for another 30 years. This renewal of the pharaoh's kingship emphasized the need for continual renewal, not just in the physical world, but in the cosmic order. Daily offerings to the gods, particularly Ra, Osiris, and Maat herself, were also part of the pharaoh's responsibilities. These offerings were meant to keep the gods satisfied and maintain cosmic balance. Rituals like the opening of the mouth ceremony, performed both during the pharaoh's life and after death, symbolized the pharaoh's ability to speak the words of power that ensured Egypt's continued prosperity and balance. While Maat was embodied in the pharaoh, it wasn't just a divine principle, it was a social and ethical code that governed every aspect of Egyptian life. Maat applied to all Egyptians, from the lowest laborer to the highest noble, and it dictated how they interacted with each other and the divine. For instance, in legal matters, Maat was the foundation of justice. Judges were expected to rule based on the principles of Maat, ensuring that truth and fairness prevailed in all decisions. The pharaoh, as the ultimate judge, was expected to uphold Maat in his laws and decrees, ensuring social harmony and balance. Everyday interactions were also guided by Maat, whether in personal conduct, family relations, or trade. The ancient Egyptians placed a high value on honesty, fairness, and integrity, believing that these principles were necessary to maintain order in society. Maat was not just an abstract concept. It was woven into the fabric of Egyptian social norms. For example, the instruction of Ptahhotep, a piece of ancient Egyptian literature from the Old Kingdom, gave advice on how to live by Maat, emphasizing respect, kindness, and moderation in all aspects of life. The idea of Maat was central to Egyptian civilization, from the pharaoh's divine rule to the daily lives of ordinary people. Maat was more than just a principle of cosmic balance. It was the very foundation of Egyptian society. It governed how the pharaoh ruled, how people interacted with each other, and how they connected to the divine. In the end, Maat wasn't just something to be revered in temples. It was something to live by in everyday life. Whether in the rituals of kingship, the administration of justice, or the way Egyptians treated one another, the principles of Maat were woven into the moral fabric of Egyptian culture. The stability, prosperity, and longevity of Egypt depended on maintaining Maat, ensuring that truth, balance, and order would always prevail, not only in the divine realm, but in the everyday lives of all Egyptians. In ancient Egypt, the idea of cosmic balance, the delicate equilibrium between order, Maat, and chaos, was central to their understanding of the universe. While the gods of order, like Ra, Osiris, and Thoth, were essential for maintaining life and stability, it was equally important to recognize that the forces of chaos, though seemingly destructive, were necessary to ensure that balance could exist. Apep, the giant serpent of chaos, and Ammit, the devourer of hearts, were such forces, representing both destruction and the moral limits that needed to be upheld. Apep, also known as Apophis, was one of Egypt's most feared deities, despite his role as an embodiment of chaos. Depicted as a colossal serpent or snake, Apep was the archetype of destruction, a force constantly in opposition to Ra, the sun god. Every night, as Ra sailed through the Duat, the underworld, Apep would attempt to swallow the sun, threatening to plunge the world into eternal darkness. This battle wasn't just a myth. It represented a cosmic struggle between light and darkness, order and chaos, life and death. Apep's presence was felt in Egyptian rituals, especially during times of warfare and political upheaval, when the pharaohs, seen as Ra's earthly embodiment, invoked the power of order to fight off the forces of disorder. Apep was not merely evil. His role was necessary. He was the dark force that challenged the gods of light and tested the strength of Maat, the principle of cosmic harmony. Without Apep, Ra's victory would be meaningless, just as life would lose its significance without death. Apep's chaos ensured that order could be preserved, making him a crucial part of the cosmic cycle. The Egyptians performed specific rituals to ward off Apep's influence, including reciting spells to protect themselves from darkness and evil spirits. In temples dedicated to Ra, particularly at Heliopolis, priests would reenact the battle between Ra and Apep, symbolizing the defeat of chaos and the restoration of cosmic order. While Apep symbolized the forces of chaos, Ammit represented a more direct form of cosmic justice. Depicted as a terrifying creature, a crocodile-headed lioness with the body of a hippopotamus, Ammit's role in the afterlife was to ensure that only the worthy would pass into eternity. Ammit's task was to devour the hearts of those who had failed the judgment of Osiris. If the heart of the deceased was found to be heavy with sin during the weighing of the heart ceremony, it would be cast into Ammit's jaws, resulting in eternal obliteration. Ammit's role was not purely evil. She symbolized the necessary consequences of imbalance. For the Egyptians, moral actions were directly tied to cosmic order. Only those who had lived a life in accordance with Maat, with truth, justice, and balance, were allowed to join the gods in the afterlife. Ammit's task was to uphold justice by ensuring that those who disrupted the balance through wrongdoing were denied eternity. In contrast to the destructive forces of Apep and Ammit, the Egyptians also revered deities who symbolized protection, particularly for the most vulnerable members of society, women and children. Two of the most beloved and protective gods were Bes and Taweret. These deities were often invoked during times of vulnerability, such as childbirth and infancy, when both mother and child were at the highest risk. Bes was often depicted as a dwarf god, with a wild face, protruding tongue, and an appearance that could easily be described as frightening. But despite his somewhat grotesque appearance, Bes was a god of protection, particularly for women in childbirth and children. He was thought to chase away evil spirits that might threaten the mother or child during labor, making him a crucial figure in the birthing process. Bes's role wasn't limited to childbirth. He was also a god of joy and domestic well-being. Depictions of Bes often show him playing musical instruments or dancing, symbolizing his influence over harmony and happiness within the home. Families would place figurines of Bes in their homes or tombs, hoping to secure his protection and invite prosperity into their daily lives. His protective nature was seen as a balance to the forces of chaos that threatened the home, ensuring that the family unit remained strong and united. Another key figure in the protection of women and children was Taweret, the goddess of fertility, childbirth, and motherhood. Often depicted as a hippopotamus with the limbs of a lioness and the tail of a crocodile, Taweret was a powerful protector during times of vulnerability, particularly in childbirth. Like Bes, Taweret was believed to guard the mother and child against malevolent forces, ensuring that the birthing process was smooth and safe. Taweret was not just a deity for childbirth, however. She also symbolized life's fertility, renewal, and the protection of life. Her connection to the hippopotamus, an animal associated with water and fertility, emphasized her role as a force of life-giving protection. Egyptian women, especially those giving birth, often wore amulets of Taweret as a symbol of her protective powers. Taweret also had a role in the afterlife, where she was believed to protect the deceased from the dangers of the Duat, ensuring they could move safely to the afterlife. The ancient Egyptians viewed their world through the lens of balance, where forces of chaos were necessary to maintain the equilibrium of the universe. Apep and Ammit, while destructive, were essential figures in ensuring that the universe did not fall into disorder. Their existence reminded the Egyptians that for order to be meaningful, there had to be a counterforce to challenge it. At the same time, the Egyptians revered deities like Bes and Taweret, who safeguarded the vulnerable and ensured that life, particularly in its early stages, was protected from harm. These gods symbolized the need for protection, fertility, and continuity, reinforcing the idea that balance existed not just between life and death, but also between danger and security. Through these deities, the Egyptians maintained a view of the world where all forces, whether destructive or protective, had a necessary role in the cosmic order. By recognizing the importance of both chaos and protection, the Egyptians reinforced their belief that balance was the key to understanding not just the universe but their own lives. In the ancient Egyptian worldview, kingship was not just a political role, it was a divine office. The pharaoh was the living representative of the gods, specifically the god Horus, who was believed to be both the protector and king of Egypt. This divine kingship was central to Egyptian civilization, giving the pharaoh not just authority over the people, but also the sacred responsibility of maintaining the cosmic order. From the Old Kingdom, c. 2686-2181 BCE, through the New Kingdom, c. 1550-1070 BCE, the pharaoh's rule was legitimized by the belief that they were Horus in human form, the god of kingship and the sky. This divine authority made the pharaoh the bridge between the gods and the people, with the pharaoh responsible for upholding Maat, the divine principle of truth, balance, and order. The pharaoh's kingship was a reflection of the order of the cosmos, a role that demanded not just political acumen, but divine virtue. The pharaoh's legitimacy came from their divine connection to Horus, and their actions, both in peace and war, were seen as divinely inspired. The pharaoh's ability to maintain Maat on earth ensured the stability of Egypt, protecting the kingdom from external threats and ensuring fertility, prosperity, and justice for the people. The connection between the pharaoh and Horus was central to Egyptian religious beliefs. Horus, the son of Osiris, symbolized order, kingship, and divine justice. When Osiris was murdered by his brother Set, Horus avenged his father's death and became the rightful ruler of Egypt. This act of vengeance marked Horus as the divine protector of Egypt, the one who would ensure that cosmic balance was maintained and that chaos would never reign. By ascending to the throne, the pharaoh was not simply assuming political power, they were taking on the mantle of Horus. This divine association meant that the pharaoh's authority was absolute, with the pharaoh considered unquestionably divine. The pharaoh's role as Horus on earth meant that they were responsible for ensuring the prosperity of the land, the welfare of the people, and the maintenance of order in both the human and divine realms. The symbolism associated with the pharaoh's regalia and crowns was crucial in visually expressing their divine kingship. The pshent, the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, was one of the most important symbols of the pharaoh's divine authority. The combination of the white crown of Upper Egypt, Hedjet, and the red crown of Lower Egypt, Deshret, represented the unification of the two lands under the pharaoh's rule. The pshent symbolized that the pharaoh, as Horus, ruled over all of Egypt, embodying the divine power that was necessary to bring order to the land. In addition to the crowns, the crook and flail were crucial elements of the pharaoh's regalia. The crook symbolized the pharaoh's role as a shepherd of the people, guiding them to prosperity, while the flail represented the pharaoh's role as the enforcer of laws and the protector of the people. These symbols, held in the pharaoh's hands during ceremonies, represented their dual responsibility to nourish and protect Egypt. The pharaoh's titles, such as Living Horus and Son of Ra, reinforced their divine status. These titles were more than just ceremonial. They were expressions of the pharaoh's sacred duty to maintain Maat and protect Egypt's divine favor. One of the most significant moments in the pharaoh's reign was the coronation ceremony, particularly the transfiguration ceremony, where the pharaoh was ritually transformed into the divine incarnation of Horus. This ceremony marked the moment when the pharaoh assumed their divine role and became the living Horus, the god of kingship. The transfiguration wasn't just symbolic, it was a spiritual rebirth that gave the pharaoh the divine legitimacy to rule. The transfiguration ceremony was a highly ritualized event that took place in the presence of priests and officials. The pharaoh would undergo a series of rituals, including being anointed with sacred oils and dressed in the divine regalia. The pharaoh would be presented as Horus, symbolically stepping into the role of god and king. This transformation was reinforced by the rituals of renewal, particularly during the Heb-Sed festival, where the pharaoh would demonstrate their continued vitality and fitness to rule. This ceremonial act of reaffirming the pharaoh's divine kingship was crucial for ensuring the cosmic renewal and prosperity of Egypt. The pharaoh's divine kingship was not limited to the royal court. It had a profound impact on Egyptian society as a whole. The pharaoh was seen as the guardian of Maat, and it was their responsibility to maintain order in both the spiritual and physical realms. Their divine rule ensured the balance of the cosmos, the welfare of the people, and the prosperity of the land. This divine authority extended into every aspect of Egyptian life, from rituals to laws, and even to the military. The pharaoh's legitimacy was maintained through religious devotion, political influence, and the ability to perform sacred rituals that ensured Egypt's favor with the gods. The pharaoh's divine kingship was the cornerstone of ancient Egyptian civilization. As the living embodiment of Horus, the pharaoh wielded the power to maintain order and balance in Egypt. Through their rituals, crowns, regalia, and the sacred transfiguration ceremony, the pharaoh was not just a king, they were a divine ruler, responsible for ensuring that cosmic order and Maat were upheld. This sacred duty tied the pharaoh not only to the people of Egypt, but to the gods themselves, ensuring that Egypt remained a land of prosperity, order, and divine favor for centuries. The ancient Egyptian pantheon of gods, rich with complex stories of life, death, and rebirth, has left a profound legacy on the world's religious thought, art, and cultural identity. As Egypt's civilization grew, its mythology spread far beyond the borders of the Nile, influencing some of the most powerful empires in history, from the Greeks to the Romans and beyond. The symbols, stories, and deities of ancient Egypt have endured through the ages, adapting and resonating with cultures across the globe. To understand why Egyptian mythology remains so captivating today, we must trace its influence on later civilizations and explore how its powerful imagery continues to shape modern culture. The interaction between Egypt and Greece reached a high point during the Ptolemaic period, 323-30 BCE, when the Greek-speaking Ptolemaic dynasty ruled Egypt. This period saw the fusion of Egyptian and Greek religious practices, most notably the worship of Isis, one of the most important deities in the Egyptian pantheon. The Greek and Roman adoption of Isis began during this period, and her cult spread across the Mediterranean, becoming one of the most widely worshipped deities in the Roman world. Isis, originally a goddess of magic and healing in Egypt, was adopted by the Greeks and later the Romans as a mother goddess with universal appeal. In Rome, she became associated with the earth, fertility, and protection, and was even invoked by the emperors as a source of divine favor. The Roman Emperor Augustus incorporated the worship of Isis into his imperial ideology, reflecting Egypt's lasting religious and political influence. Another striking example is Serapis, a deity created by the Ptolemies by merging elements of Osiris, Apis, the sacred bull, and Greek gods like Zeus and Hades. Serapis represented a fusion of Egyptian and Greek religious traditions, symbolizing the power of both cultures. His worship spread from Alexandria to Rome and beyond, where he became a symbol of healing and restoration. Beyond the gods, Egyptian ideas of divine kingship influenced Greek and Roman rulers. The Greek concept of Hellenistic kingship, where monarchs were seen as semi-divine, was shaped by Egyptian models. The pharaoh's role as Horus on earth, the living embodiment of divine kingship, was mirrored by later rulers who adopted similar imagery of divine right and cosmic authority. While Egyptian mythology profoundly influenced ancient cultures, its symbolic power and iconic imagery continue to captivate modern audiences. The Eye of Horus, the pyramids, mummies, and divine imagery have made their way into art, literature, movies, and even fashion. These symbols are not just relics of the past. They are timeless emblems that continue to evoke mysticism, power, and mystery. Perhaps one of the most enduring symbols of Egyptian mythology is the Eye of Horus, an emblem of protection, healing, and divine insight. In ancient Egypt, it was worn by the pharaoh as a mark of divine protection. The Eye of Horus has transcended its religious roots, appearing in modern art, jewelry, and even the medical field, where it is often seen as a symbol of healing and protection. The Eye of Horus's presence in pop culture is vast. It has appeared in everything from films and graphic novels to fashion and advertising. The symbol is particularly prominent in mystical or occult themes, where it often represents an ancient, hidden knowledge. In modern movies like The Mummy, 1999, the Eye of Horus is often portrayed as a key to unlocking ancient secrets, linking back to its original use in Egyptian mythology as a symbol of protection and spiritual insight. The pyramid is perhaps the most iconic structure associated with ancient Egypt. Its symbolic power has remained a central fixture in modern architecture, art, and popular culture. The Great Pyramid of Giza, as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, continues to captivate the imagination of people around the globe, standing as a symbol of Egypt's ingenuity and eternal mystery. From the Art Deco movement of the 1920s, which drew heavily on Egyptian motifs, to modern architecture, the pyramid shape continues to be a powerful symbol of the ancient world's greatness. The mummy, too, remains a central figure in modern culture. The ancient practice of mummification, with its focus on preserving life for the afterlife, has been romanticized and mythologized in literature and film. Mummy-themed horror films like The Mummy, 1932, as well as their more recent iterations, continue to draw on the ancient Egyptian belief in life after death, immortality, and the preservation of the soul. The fear and fascination with the mummy's curse also reflects our collective anxiety about the unknown and the powerful forces of ancient beliefs. What makes Egyptian mythology so timeless? Its universal themes, life, death, rebirth, order, and chaos, speak to the core human experience, transcending centuries and cultures. These are the same questions we ask today. What happens after death? How do we balance order and chaos? The Egyptians had answers to these questions, and their answers still resonate today. At the heart of Egyptian mythology is the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The story of Osiris, whose death and resurrection embody the cycle of seasons and the promise of eternal life, is particularly powerful in its message of hope, renewal, and immortality. These themes are central to many modern religions and philosophies, making Egyptian mythology incredibly relevant in today's world. The balance between order and chaos represented by the constant struggle between Ra and Apep, mirrors our own societal struggles with balance. In an increasingly chaotic world, the Egyptian ideal of Maat, the principle of truth and balance, offers a timeless ideal for how we should strive to live our lives with integrity, fairness, and order in the face of disorder. Egyptian mythology continues to captivate modern audiences because its universal themes address the core aspects of human existence. Its gods, symbols, and stories offer a connection between the ancient and the modern, reminding us that questions of life, death, rebirth, and order have always been central to the human condition. From art to literature, and from movies to advertising, Egyptian mythology remains a source of inspiration and fascination, holding up a mirror to our own eternal questions about existence and the unknown. Thank you for watching this story until the end. If you found this one captivating, you're in for a treat with the next one. It's just as fascinating, if not more, than you could ever imagine. Don't miss out. Click on the image on your screen now to dive into the next adventure.